Well, YouTube friends, I'm at it again. I'm back on my loom. I don't actually like weaving as much as I like other things, but I do tend to get back on my loom. So I'm going to make some dish towels, okay? And thankfully this is a shorter warp, so it won't take me so long and I won't get so bored or frustrated. The other thing I've done differently this time, let me see if I can show you. In order to keep my loom from slipping in this dresser drawer, because you can see I've opened the drawer and got the loom resting inside of it, and I need to allow room for my roller bar and stuff, so sometimes my loom will shift back and forth, but this time I've got a clamp on this end and I've got a clamp on the other end, and hopefully that will keep it from doing any of that slipping. Alright, it's a shorter warp, so instead of taking it all the way back behind that piece of furniture there, I'm only doing it to the knob of the chair. That's going to give me about, I think, around 50 to 60 inches of warp. Now I'm going to get my tensioning device set up. This says left side, so I'll put it over here. Make sure and shove it all the way up. This says right side. And if you're wondering about the tensioning device, I will leave a link up in the corner right now so that you can watch the other video where Adam made these for me. Okay, so that's how easy it is to put the tensioning device base on the side rails. Okay, so I'm going to leave these side rails here while I warp my loom, and then after I have my warp yarn on there, then I'll put my dowels on. Okay, so this will be, I'll speed this up. You don't need to see this all again. I'm using Lily's Sugar and Cream. This is cotton, which is what you want to use, of course, if you're doing dish towels. I always like to pull from the middle. And yes, I do go in and grab the innards. And if you grab an innard and you see you only have one string, then you know you're doing pretty good. And then sometimes you can grab more innards and still come out with one string, okay? And then you know you're really close to your end. Now this is not mercerized cotton. This is natural cotton, which is more absorbent. Mercerized cotton has been treated with some chemical in a factory, and it's not bad or anything. It's just it's less absorbent, kind of more shiny, smooth. But you want this nice rough cotton, and that's what this Sugar and Cream, and there's some other brands. This is one that people buy a lot though. But you can buy that at any yard store. Yeah, that's what I'm working with today. I've got a purple, kind of a lavender purple. Now listen, this is out of the yard stash. I've got some yellow and a little bit of white. Now I want my dish towels to be about 15 inches wide. I don't want a huge dish towel. In our kitchen, we have a small kitchen. Everything's small in our kitchen, and so I don't want massive dish towels. The little hook that we hang them on has a certain length of wall underneath it, and if the dish towels are too big, they hang down on the sink. I intend to do something to this little threading hook that comes with the Ashford loom, because I can never find it in my box. It just blends in with everything. So I'm gonna paint it orange or something. I don't know. Okay, so I want my towel. I like to weave in the middle of the loom. Different people have different habits. Okay, that's the weave kind of narrows from the warp down to this front roller, and in my experience, as you're warping it up, when it gets to this front roller, they're laying flat and they're close together, and they're about the same. The weave will be about the same width as it is when you finish it. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. Now I am going to try to be much better about not putting too much tension on my yarn as I'm just looping this warp. this is not the time to put tension into your yarn. The time you put tension into your yarn is when you're winding your warp and using your tensioning device. And I should not put enough tension on this yarn that it pulls the chair. Now, I don't know that I have ever woven with cotton before. I've woven with acrylic almost exclusively, maybe a little wool, but not with cotton. Feels nice. I've heard that it doesn't have as much give. This is the thing, I don't have to worry so much about the tension now, because once I cut those ends and I use my tensioning device, it will even everything out. It's just that my lengths may be different once I cut it, but I don't really mind about that. I'm going to cut all that off and finish it. The thing about a dish towel is you have to finish it, unless you want a fringe in your dish towel, you have to finish it with a hem. So you can see the difference in the warp here. See how these strings sit above and these rest? And you know, some people will be like, oh, that's going to be terrible. But once you cut it on the other end, they're all going to drop. And they're all going to be loose. They're all going to be totally loose. And that's when you put your tension in. Okay, what do you think? Should I do? I think we better stick with purple. But I'm going to do 10 loops of purple. And the big question is, will there be enough? Will there be enough? And then the next big question is, what in the world am I going to use for my weft yarn? Since I'm clearly using up all of my yarn for my warp. I don't know yet. But that will be fun. I'll pull out all of my cotton yarn, unmercerized, for you to see, and we'll decide. Got me a tangle. There's a little tangle. There's one little tangle. Come on, tangle. I forget what question I asked recently on a weaving group or spinning group. I forget what it was, and some woman answered me something like, this is an ancient traditional art and it deserves the very best yarn. Oh, I was asking where to buy cheaper yarn instead of paying through the nose. And people really snickered at her. And I thought of all the women who would just weave with whatever was around to clothe their families. They did not consider it an art. Okay, so you see how different my warp is? It's floppy over here, it's tight over here. You know, the second I cut it on that other end, it will not matter. It just means that these will be slightly longer and these will be shorter. But don't worry about these differences in tension at this point, okay? It's not anything to think about. All that stick back there is doing, that peg is giving you a spot to loop your warp around. It's not creating any tension for your project. Okay, so now we're going to do our tensioning device. Okay, now I have cut my warp ends down there. As you see, everything's droopy here. And I've also done what they say on the Ashford video, which is to tie it off here. But the other thing you want to do, since most of these yarns are just looped around that back warping stick, you don't want them to be shifting while you're working on it, while you're working on your tensioning device. So what I do is also tie these off in a little ponytail to prevent that from happening. This is just to keep these yarns in place. Alright, now let's work on our tensioning device. See if I can remember how to do this. I know that the back roller needs to be underneath the yarn. Let me get that in place first. Well, those are all messed up now. And then I have a second roller that goes underneath as well. See, and as I'm fiddling with these, that's why I want this to be pretty stationary here, so that I can safely fiddle with these without worrying about them shifting too much. And then I want this one on top here in the front. And this one on top here. Now for all you people with an Ashford rigid Heddle loom, if you're wondering, is there space between my Heddle And my back warping stick for a tensioning device, yes there is. That's 4 rollers. These 2 are 1 inch. This one's larger than 1 inch. This one's slightly smaller. You see there's plenty of room. Okay? Now I'm going to take a second to straighten all of these sticks. I might take this one out to straighten all of these warp yarns, and you don't have to watch me do all that. Alright, now I'm going to see how nice and tidy that is now. Now I'm going to use my different rubber bands and hair ties to strap down these rollers to keep them from slipping at all. I have to pass them underneath this sidebar rest. The ones that lay on top, of course, are very easy. And the ones that are underneath are a little trickier. I think I'll save the hair bands for those that are a little harder. There we go. You just put your hand underneath. You turn the camera down, you can watch this last one. And you just reach underneath, grab it, make it tight, bring it up. So now they're really good. Now the other thing I've done, that I don't know how necessary it is, I've also put one of these ties on there. But boy, that is so tight. I don't really think I need that this time. We'll see. I also don't think this brace is not going to shift at all. Okay, now I'll do the other side. Really is just as easy as pie. I don't find pie that easy, but it is quite easy. Put these on. But it is important to put these bands on last, after you've had a chance to fiddle with your rollers. Okay. And now the warping up is so easy. And see, with all that fiddling, this little tie right here kept everything tidy. So now I'm just going to very loosely hold this. I don't have to apply any pressure, no tension, anything to my left hand here, because all the tensioning work, all the pulling, everything is done by these rollers. I can really just rest my hand there. And as a lady named Lee on my Facebook group, as she said, I don't like this Ashford latch. It does not work well. You let the Heddle, which is here, it combs all the fabric smooth. Okay, it's good to start with it smooth, but it combs it all smooth before it goes through the tensioning device. It probably would be better, I guess, if I didn't have these right next to each other. It's nice to get these rollers as close together as possible. Of course, you do have the there's a little bit of gap created by these bands that are in there. But I do think I'm going to use one. So I would like for these to be closer together. As close together as I can get them. The closer they are, the better tension I get, the less work I have to do. I've because as you see here, they barely stick out over the edge of this. If they were a little bit longer, I might have room to put it on here, but I don't mind putting it on the inside. That works fine too. All right, now that is much better. Ooh. That's almost too much tension. Ah, you know why? It's because it's cotton yarn. Now this cotton yarn is stiff. It's not slick like acrylic. It's a little thicker than the yarn I've used before. That shouldn't make a difference. But I do think I'm going to get good tension. But it is, my right hand is having to work in order to wind that around. I got so distracted I didn't put any of those sticks back there. But this is a dish towel. It's not some kind of an elegant shawl or something. Notice how I don't really even have to hold that. I'm going to comb it a little bit, but man, that yarn goes through. That is some nice tension. I did put a little rubber band. These things were popping off the end, and so I put a hair tie and a hair tie on that end, as you see here, to prevent this from popping off. Keep everything stationary. This was coming off, and now it seems to be quite good. The thing is, these looms were designed for tension, so I don't worry about doing too much. Honestly, I put a lot more torque on that back roller when I'm weaving than I am now. A lot of people don't warp to a single point here. They warp to a variety of pegs at the other end on a warping board with pegs on it. That actually may work better for your length, but it's not really a huge deal. Notice how I don't have to do anything. This is really like cranking spaghetti. I just need to make sure I keep the right length here. This is fascinating to do it this way. That tensioning device is so nice and tight. Really kind of want to look for your shortest strings. Seems like some of my white ones seem to be the shortest. I think I can do a little bit more. Alright, so there's my warp. For those of you still interested in the tensioning device, that's another good example of using it with cotton. I would just say, be careful how tight you cinch up your rollers, because they really work, and if you get them with a yarn that's not slick, it will really grab a hold of them, of the yarn. I think part of it is that except for this brown roller, these other ones are rougher. They were dowels from the hardware store, and we sanded them some, but not much, so they really grip the yarn better, which does better tension, but the more the yarn gets held inside of this device, the better tension you get. Okay, so now I will take the tensioning device off, and I will slay my yarn through the Heddle, through the reed, and then I'll start selecting yarn for my weft. This front end of my warp And one of the frustrations when you're weaving is having these warp knots that are at all different spots. And I don't do a perfect job of it, but I've learned a little bit of a trick that I think will be helpful. I do 3 at a time. I think not doing huge bunches is good. And I leave my finger in here. And then I take a ruler and I put it in. I kind of lower the yarn down so that these threads stand out. Put it in these 3 and the previous ones. And then I slowly tighten that knot up until it's in alignment with the ones next to it. And then you can do little adjustments at the end. That looks pretty good actually. Now as you're tying, securing your warp strings to your front warping stick, if you discover that you placed your knots too far forward and they're actually touching or go beyond the warping stick, don't feel like you have to re-knot. You don't. All you have to do is just adjust your back warping stick, move it this way, and that'll give you more room. Okay, so move your stick back. Don't move your knots up. Now as you see, I've done a pretty decent job. I haven't tightened this yet. I haven't gone back and fiddled with it like shoelaces. But I did a pretty decent job with my knots, and I'm really pleased with the tension. I just want to point out again to anybody watching that I rolled that tension myself without any assistance because I use the tensioning device. It just makes the work so much easier. So yeah, looking good. I just want to add too, as you're going back and you're tightening like this, tightening these the lacings on your knots, it's good to have a long tail here that you can hang on to, because you want to hang on to this end while you can go all the way across to this end and tighten. You don't want to let this go, and it really takes 2 hands to tighten well. So make sure that however long your string is, this is just some nice white twine, however long it is, that you have enough for a good tail that will allow this hand, your left hand, to stretch across that way. And again, the way that I knot this here is I keep a loop here and pull it through. And then I do that about 3 times. Put that under and put it through a loop. Put that under and put it through a loop. Makes it nice and secure. Now when making dish towels, you don't want to have a fringe on the end. You want to be able to hem it. But because yarn is bulkier than some other things, especially this is a worsted weight yarn, if I have the ends be both warp and weft as a worsted yarn, it's going to be a very bulky hem at the end. I'm going to finish it off by sewing it. And so obviously I can't make my warp yarns down here thinner, but I can use a very thin crochet thread down here for about, I think, like a 1/2 inch or 1 inch. I'm going to do a little bit of weaving down here in that thinner thread, and then when I need to turn that up and finish that edge, it won't be as bulky. So that's a little trick. You can see down in that bottom drawer of this dresser, I've got some crochet thread. I'm going to use some white. This is a size 10 crochet thread. And a very lovely spinning and weaving friend. Yesterday I went to visit her. We had a great time talking yarn. She gave me this little 6-inch shuttle. I don't have anything but 2 very long shuttles, and it's pretty frustrating. And so I'm just going to loop this around a few times. This, I don't need this for very long, but oh, it'll be so much better than putting it into a little ball and trying to pass the ball through the shed. This will be better. If I put this onto one of my really long shuttles, it's not very much yarn, and it wouldn't really stay on well. So this is a perfect solution. So I'm thanking my friend. Isn't that the cutest little shuttle? I put some scrap yarn at the bottom. The shuttle is pretty short, but that's okay. I don't have to do but just a few rows. I put some scrap yarn at the bottom down here, and then I put just one cardboard strip because I don't want to use up too much of my warp down here fiddling, because I have a very nice straight line, so I'm pretty pleased with that. And this part of my weave will be tucked into a hem along the end. So I also need to look up hem stitching. That's something that people do at the bottom of their weave, and that I'm interested in doing. I don't know if you do it before you put an actual real hem in, or if it's something that you just put in to kind of secure and tighten your fringe. And since I'm not doing fringe, I might not need that. I'm not really sure. Perhaps you could use it in both situations. I don't want to cinch my edges over here. Now I do want a loose weave. I don't want a really tight weave. I'm not going to beat very hard on here because I want this towel to have some drape. You don't want a stiff dish towel. So, but this is just the beginning. And like I said, it's going to be hidden inside of a hem. One thing I've noticed since using my tensioning device is that I don't have as many floaters as I used to have, or floats. And a float is a warp or weft yarn that is too loose because the tension isn't consistent and tight enough, and so the shuttle, when it passes through, think about this because this shuttle is a little short for this piece, but I used to have a lot of floats. I used to regularly have floats, and I noticed in the last piece I did, the scarf, that I had none. Okay, so I've got, actually that's probably good. I'll do a border like this on the other end, but this just means that when I sever this and I turn it up and turn it up again, that'll be easier sewing, but it won't show, this part won't show. Okay, so I think might snip that off and maybe tie those together loosely so neither one of them comes loose. Alright, so now we're going to look at some yarn. Again, we're looking at unmercerized cotton. I'll show you a little mercerized. I think you'll be able to tell the difference. I have lots of it. It's all in little bits and pieces. And I'd like to have the longest pieces possible in my yarn, in my dish towel, because you don't want little ends floating everywhere. So let me show you first of all what I had left of my warp yarn. I have this much yellow, this much white, and that much purple. But I am not going to despair, and I know that there are ways to calculate how much yarn you need for your warp and your weft before you start to do a certain pattern. And if I were doing something much fancier than a dishcloth, honestly, I would just make sure I had tons of that yarn. I don't want to do the math. My husband asked me this morning, would you like me to set you up a spreadsheet to help you figure that out? And I was like, no, that's exactly what I never want to do. Okay, so but I know what I do want. I do think I have enough yarn. I have lots of yarn. But I want pastels. Okay, I do want all of the yarn to be this unmercerized. This is Lily's Sugar and Cream. That would be a very good choice. I can kind of put it with these other three that I've used, and I know that that will really go well. That's actually a bit of yarn. Okay. Blue I think might work fine. This is called Cotton Made, 100% cotton yarn 4-ply. Same weight. I don't want anything that's a different weight. One thing I will not do is put all these together, even the short pieces, with knots in between. You do not want knots in your weave ever. See, this was here, I believe, is some mercerized cotton. And it has a shinier look. This is actually pretty old. I got 7 skeins of this at one point. Yeah, this is 100% mercerized cotton. Not quite as absorbent. And really, you wouldn't actually probably want that look in a dish towel. Oh, here's some that would work very nicely, I think. Now, here's an idea. Here's a whole skein of creamy white. It's very close to my original white. I could really use that as a primary. I hate to do that in a dish towel because they will get dirty. And white is problematic. Here's yet more yellow. Very similar. I don't want the dark green. No, I don't. However, it's nice to know I've got so much of this dark green because that means when I make dish towels in the future, I can make some like that. Maybe some kind of autumny or Christmassy ones. Taking it out, I'll probably take that out. That's very close to my original purple. I think I will certainly use that one. And here's a little bit more of this one. These are definitely for making dish towels, dishcloths, excuse me. I knit those as the easiest little pattern, and I can't say that I can knit in my sleep, but I can kind of knit without thinking too much. Okay, so I think I've made my decision. I'm going to definitely use this purple. It's almost an exact match for the other purple. And here's a little bit of white. I've got little pieces of, well, not little pieces, but short pieces of yellow. And here's that kind of more of a pinky mauve. I'll use that. And I definitely use this variegated. That should look interesting. And then I'm going to add a lot of pink. So there you go. Now we'll get started weaving.